When a person gives any portion of their treasure to support the Holy Cross mission at St. Edward's, they become someone's hero. We're deeply grateful for all of our donors. When a donor expands student opportunities so vastly, they become Edwardians, a title fitting for anyone whose philanthropy will benefit future generations of St. Edward students indefinitely. Across 3 levels of Edwardians, bronze, silver, and gold, we are proud to include more than 130 donor families. Tonight, we welcome our newest Bronze Edwardians. Alphabetically by last name, we are proud to recognize the extraordinary generosity of 26 donor families. Donald C. Anderson, M.D. Mrs. Beryl and Mr. John E. Ball, Class of 1968. Mrs. Kathleen and Mr. Thomas Berg, Class of 1961. Mrs. Carmel and Mr. Thomas Borders. The Collins family, including Jim and Will Collins. Mrs. Diane and Mr. James D'Agostino. Mrs. Lori and Mr. Kenneth DeAngelis. The late Charlotte K. Flynn. Mrs. Ellie Ghaznavi Salamat, Class of 1989, and Mr. Sina Salamat. Mrs. Betsy and Mr. David Lee Huggart, Master of Liberal Arts alumnus from the Class of 2005. Mrs. Jacqueline Klepas, Class of 1978. Mrs. Teresa Laval, Class of 1971, and the late Mr. Gregory Laval, Class of 1970. Mike Luxinger, Class of 1974. Mrs. Nancy McDonald Jordan, Class of 2003, and Dr. Mark E. Jordan. Dr. Eva Munoz Martin, Class of 2004 and Master of Business Administration graduate from the Class of 1987, and President George E. Martin, Ph.D. The late Mrs. Jeanette Nassor and the late Mr. Ferris Nassor. The Pacey family, including Mary Sue and Russ Pacey and Alicia Pacey from the Class of 2000. The Powell family, including Carolyn Sabin, Executive Director of the Powell Foundation, and Nancy Powell Moore. The Reckling family, including Cliff Reckling and Thomas Reckling III, both of the Sterling Turner Foundation. The late Rosemary L. Schwartzer. Mrs. Dawn and Dr. David C.C. Sprague, Class of 1995. The Talker family, including Daryl and Terry Talker. Mrs. Anita and Mr. Paul Tremonte, Class of 1991. Dr. Kathleen and Dr. Ralph Wilburn. Mrs. Tommy and Mr. Peter Winstead.